All right. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? You guys all have yourselves unable to be seen. So I can't even see you nodding your heads. Maybe you want to chat if you can hear me. Yes, thank you. All right, fabulous. So welcome to the Vsas Q&A. I'm going to be recording this session so that those people who couldn't be here at this time will be able to look back on it and get any helpful information. I see, I think right now, just one of our fourth years, although I know that I had a couple others that were planning on coming too. But hopefully between us, we'll be able to answer all of your questions. And my plan for this session was to leave it very open and just have it be a question and answer forum. So hopefully you guys brought your Vsas, audition rotation, sub-internship questions with you. And Lucy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself so that people know who you are and kind of what your pathway has been so far in terms of using Vsas and where you're headed.
Oh, this is third year Lucy, sorry.
Oh, it's third year Lucy. Okay, yeah. Fourth year Lucy. There's no last name, so I just.
So I don't know. Yeah.
Fourth year Lucy was one of the ones who was supposed to be here, so
Okay.
he'll be joining in a little bit.
Okay.
And then I know Mohammed and Roshni were the other two that were going to be joining us. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Last name. So I guess while we're waiting for them to come, why don't I answer your questions? So what questions do you guys have? You guys can unmute yourselves and ask them out loud. You can type them in chat.
I just had a question. So I know you mentioned that if we don't get a sub-I at a hospital, that we should try to do a different core rotation at the hospital. And so is that something we would be applying for right now, or is that something we would look into later on?
So usually when you apply at a residency program, you give them multiple options of the type of rotation that you're interested in doing at their program. And usually they let you rank it, like what your number one preference is versus your second or third preference. So those are the things you'd put in your second and third preference. So your number one preference would be you know, to do a sub-I, so an inpatient rotation with them. And then if they don't have that available, that's when you're selecting the other rotations that would at least put you physically there at the site of the residency program, so you can try to interact with the residents while you're there.
Okay, so if we wanted to, I don't have the fourth year list in front of me, but if we had an emergency, we could just do an emergency core rotation there. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Totally. I see a question in chat. How many rotations should we apply for in each rotation block? And that is something that is totally, that's where I really wanted our fourth years to be here so that they could tell you like what they did. That totally depends on how competitive the specialty is and how hard like how likely it is that you're actually going to be able to secure one of those rotations. So for example, if you're interested in a more competitive specialty like surgery and or you're going for more competitive locations, so like California for a lot of the other, or for all of the specialties, then I would encourage you to apply for multiple rotations per each rotation block, right? So multiple meaning maybe 3. And it also depends on kind of how desperate you're getting, right? So always making sure that you have some backups in mind, just in case you end up not having anything scheduled in the month of October, right? And so then, you know, you can always schedule a 2-week elective rotation somewhere, or you can do a research rotation, or, you know, you have something to kind of fill in the gaps so you're not just ending up with all this kind of dead time. And then if I don't answer any of your questions who are chatting in chat, let me know if you have something more specific that you want me to go over. And then the next question in chat I see, is there a timeline as to when we should be starting to apply, and does this differ per specialty? It differs per residency program. right? Which makes it all the more complicated and difficult. So that's where you're looking on Vsas to see when their applications open up for each specific residency program. Most of them have their applications open now. Some will be waiting until March or even waiting until April before they open up their applications. And so that's just a matter of you checking in with the programs that you are interested in applying to. What's the difference between the short Vsas bio versus the personal statement versus the cover letter versus the letter of intent? I love this question. So the short Vsas bio is going to be your, you know, like on LinkedIn, where at the very top of LinkedIn or at the very top of kind of the old school resumes, you would have like a paragraph statement about who you are, right? So like motivated fourth year student who's really interested in surgery or whatever, right? So it's like kind of your short statement about who you are. So if they're just glancing through things, they're going to get a feel of what kind of applicant you are and what you're looking for. Your personal statement, there's a difference between the personal statements on Vsas and the personal statements on ERAS, right? So ERAS is the personal statement that you write for residency program applications. So that should be your really strong statement of why you're interested in that particular specialty. You can absolutely use your entire personal statement for ERAS on Vsas or parts of it if you want to. Sometimes programs will ask you for a personal statement specifically, right? So to apply to this program, we need a personal statement from you. That's when I would use at least part of your personal statement, but then the very end part, I would tailor it specifically to that program that you're applying to, right? So the reason that I'm most interested in the residency program at UCSF is because of the opportunities to do more community-based medicine or whatever it is, something specific to their program. The cover letter and letter of intent are all about their program. Why are you interested in their particular program, as opposed to more general statements about yourself and what makes you the best applicant for a particular field of medicine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but does the cover letter also and letter of intent also want us to talk about our personal reasons for choosing a specific field, or no?
I would encourage you to probably have a paragraph about why you're choosing that particular field. So why you're really drawn to the field of radiology, for example. And I would include that paragraph in your personal statement, your cover letter, and your letter of intent. But then your cover letter and your letter of intent are going to have more specific information about why you're interested in that specialty at that particular hospital.
Okay. Piggybacking off of that, so I'm applying OBGYN, and for like specific institutions, they'll have like different, like one will, like let's say like, I don't know, UC Irvine has like family planning, and then they have reproductive endocrinology or infertility medicine, and then like gyn-onc surgery, that kind of thing. But like all three of them want a cover letter. Do I have to then tailor my cover letter for gyn-onc within, or like just the program itself, like OBGYN's their OB program at UCI?
Because they're all programs at the same institution, I would probably use the main cover letter saying all of the programs at UCI or OB-GYN at UCI, and then like one sentence of, you know, and I'm very interested in this particular field or something like that. So if they do share it across them, they'll see that you're being consistent, but you're interested in all of their different subspecialties.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yes. What else? What other questions do you guys have?
So I had a question about when you have multiple, if you manage to get multiple rotations in the same block, like, is there harm to, do the program directors know if you are offered a spot and then you turn it down? Like, how do I balance making sure I get my blocks filled while also not having to turn down a bunch of places because I applied to too many?
Totally. For the most part, the program director won't know that you applied and got accepted and ended up canceling a spot with them, as long as you are canceling it with plenty of notice. Plenty of notice meaning ideally 60 days. If you can't do it within 60 days, then at least a month before the rotation starts. So if you cancel it with that much time, they're able to put another student into that spot. And so that's just kind of the game that is this season, which is, as you can imagine, frustrating for you guys and frustrating for the programs as well. Usually it is a whole department of medical education, and there's a medical student subsection of that department that's working through Vsas and all of the audition rotations and all of the visiting medical students. And so that is very separate from the residency program and the residency program director. If you were to cancel, and we had a couple of these instances this year where we had students who canceled a sub-I or an audition rotation with very short notice, so less than 2 weeks, in a couple of instances less than 1 week. And those medical student coordinators contacted me as the Department of our Clinical Education and CC'd the program director of that program to let us know how disappointed they were that our student had canceled with such short notice. So if you're canceling on very short notice, then you're going to upset the program. But if you are canceling with plenty of notice, then everybody knows that that's just kind of what happens. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
To follow up on that, if you don't accept or you cancel with a lot of notice, should you send an email to the program?
No.
Okay.
I don't think you need to. I think they probably just won't know. Yeah. If it's a program you're really interested in and, for a variety of reasons, it's just not fitting with your schedule, you can always ask if you can do a rotation there later on. But otherwise, I would just interact just with that medical student coordinator area and not worry about the program. Just keep those two separate.
Okay. Thank you.
Is worthwhile to
Oh,
Hi. I think it is worthwhile to email the programs if, for example, you have applied to multiple blocks and you get accepted to somewhere else during another block, then it is appropriate to email the program and say my availability's changed, and that sort of thing. I'm still interested. I still would like to be accepted for these other blocks, but I'm no longer available for this block. Something like that. I think in that case, it's totally appropriate to email and communicate with whoever you need to communicate with. But otherwise, like Dr. Hendriksz said, not necessary.
Mandy, and I love that you are here. So if you want to just let the students that are on the call know kind of what worked for you with Vsas, what your general approach was, and also what field and area you're heading into.
Sure. So I applied to emergency medicine and I ended up doing 4 audition rotations, 3 in California, 1 out of state. And one of the programs I applied to was not on Vsas, so it was Desert Regional Medical Center, and theirs was just an application that you download off the website and you send to their program coordinator. And those programs, from what I've talked to other students about and my experience with it, you tend to find out sooner from those programs if you get accepted, and they tend to be a little bit more direct communication. Like Dr. Hendriksz said, you're not emailing the institution per se, you're emailing a person, you're sending a person your application, that person is the person you're communicating with. So I think a number of the students that applied to emergency medicine also had kind of the same experience where when they applied off of Vsas, they got responses sooner and kind of filled up their slots sooner with those programs. Otherwise, the 3 others that I did were all from Vsas, and I chose them based on location and then based on I wanted to do an out-of-state rotation, so I did 1 out of state. And yeah, so what worked for me was I ended up doing a rotation at USC, LA County, which is a very competitive program. And what worked for me, I think, in even getting that rotation was it was a Vsas application, but you also had to email the clerkship coordinator with some information when you applied. And a couple of the other Vsas programs that I applied to were the same. You had to email them like your core clerkship grades, your, what else? The name of a mentor who knows what you're specializing in and that you want to go into that field. And so I took that as an opportunity to kind of, in addition to my personal statement or my statement of interest, I took it as an opportunity to say, hey, this is one thing that I'm really excited about your program for. Here's the stuff you requested. For USC, I said that their jail emergency department, I'm really interested in correctional health. And so I took that opportunity to say, you know, this is really unique to your program. I won't get this experience anywhere else. And I would love to be a part of your clerkship as a result of that. And I think that's 100% why I got the clerkship there, was just doing that little extra thing. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to email the programs if you're very interested in them. If you get the name of the clerkship director, email them, even if they aren't requesting additional information, just to say, hey, here's something about your program that I think is super unique and super interesting, and that's the reason I want to be involved with it. It shows that you've really kind of done your research and you are seriously considering it and not just sort of, you know, shooting like holes, you know, shooting in the dark. Sorry, words are hard. I haven't slept all month, so.
Although I can hear cute little squeals of somebody who's probably been sleeping better than you have. Oh, we get to see you. Oh my gosh, so cute. Congratulations. So on top of, so you guys imagine how stressed out you guys are trying to coordinate your audition rotations and your sub-Is and your fourth year in general. Imagine doing that and being pregnant and having a baby and already having another kid at home. So totally superstar, Mandy. All right, what other questions you, oh, just to clarify, you recommend emailing the clerkship director? That's a question in chat.
Yeah, if you can find the name of that person, the clerkship director is generally the person who is kind of running your whole experience on the away rotation. So they're setting up your schedule, they're coordinating you with the residents that they are setting you up with, they're doing your orientation, they're doing your grade, they're kind of ultimately deciding who gets to get a rotation there. That's kind of their job. So yeah, I would email the clerkship director if you can find out who that person is. And for me, 2 of the places where I applied actually requested that students email the clerkship director and give some extra information on Vsas. So they had that information listed. Although one of them actually, it wasn't on Vsas. I had to go to the website of the program to find that information. So I think it's worthwhile to visit the websites if it's a program you're really interested in too.
Absolutely.
And no, the clerkship director isn't attending generally. It's one of the doctors that's involved with the program. So the program coordinator is an administrator, but the clerkship director isn't attending.
Absolutely. So there will usually be 2 people involved of the medical student side of rotations. And like I said, they're generally separate from the residency program and the residency program director. And so that will be the clerkship director, who's usually that like lead attending, who's doing the evaluations and everything that Mandy just said. And then there's also usually a coordinator who usually has a title like medical student coordinator or student education coordinator or something like that. And they're kind of that administrator, oftentimes the first initial contact through Vsas, or if it's a non-Vsas program, they'll be the first one that you email, and then they might direct you to the clerkship director from there.
Hi, Dr. Hendriksz. This is Jeff. I'm also another 4th year if you want me to.
Yay, Jeff, thank you so much. Can you tell everybody what you've done so far and what worked for you in terms of Vsas and audition rotations?
Absolutely. So I'm also going into emergency medicine. I did 4 audition rotations, 3 that I got through Vsas, 1 that I got independently. The independent one was Kern Medical Center, where they had their own application that I applied online. The other 3 were all through Vsas. And first 1 month was in Florida, and then my other 2 months were in Philadelphia and in Western Massachusetts. I definitely encountered a situation where I was debating if I needed to cancel one because I had 2 rotations. It was specifically my Florida rotation where I was accepted to that one and then had another opportunity that also came through. I was interested in both programs. I talked to Dr. Feinberg and Dr. Hartwig as to what I should do. And I was in between either going to the Florida program and saying, sorry, I can't do this, and accepting the other program. But ultimately I decided I looked for other opportunities at the second program I was interested in, that was in Staten Island, and did instead of like a trauma elective, and so through their emergency department. So instead of an actual audition rotation in emergency medicine, I did an elective in trauma within the emergency department. So I was able to keep my first Florida rotation and also do the other rotation in Staten Island and do one. So that I found that as another opportunity where you can find, instead of burning bridges, you can try to find other opportunities within a hospital to try to get a rotation and not something else. Especially in emergency medicine, they have emergency medicine ultrasound, emergency medicine critical care, emergency medicine. You can do other things within the department, not necessarily an audition, but it can be a way for you to get your name out there and pursue opportunities. So, and then just subjectively, there were some rotations that I was accepted for and I declined, and then I don't know if that affected me not getting an interview there. Not sure, but you never know. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I just now realized that I have not been looking at the full list of people on their calls. So we totally have more 4th years here, which makes me so happy. And so maybe I'll have all the other 4th years talk first. And then, and maybe for the other ones, and maybe Jeff and Mandy, you guys can answer this too. You know, there were a couple questions at the beginning of the call about how many rotations do you apply for in each rotation block? And I gave a very vague answer of it totally depends on how competitive the program is. But if you guys want to talk about how many rotations you applied for each block, I think that would be helpful. And then we'll go, I think I saw Sarah and Mohammed at least at first glance. And I'll keep looking through the list and see who else we have here too. But Mandy and Jeff, am I being very unclear? Mandy and Jeff, do you mind talking about how many audition rotations or sub-Is you applied for at each block through Vsas?
Sure, I'll go. So I don't know if I really remember, but I did apply to at least 2, I think, for each block, 2 to 3, and it did really depend on the program. So there were a few that I applied to where they were kind of like lower on the list of places that I realistically wanted to go. So maybe they had a later like notification date or something like that, because that's another thing you can kind of play with is if some of the programs, like they have different dates for when they notify you whether or not you get the rotation. So you can kind of use that to your advantage too. And if there's one that they notify really early and others that they notify really late, you can always cancel the ones that you are waiting on that are later if you get notified of the ones that you applied to early, or vice versa. You can kind of hold out certain blocks for dates for programs that notify later. So that's kind of what I did. I had a couple of programs that I was really like, I was dead set on interviewing at UC, or on rotating at UC Irvine. It's 10 minutes from my parents' house, and that was a big selling point for me. So, you know, I held out. Their date that they started even accepting Vsas wasn't until May 1st, and then they didn't notify until mid-June whether or not you got the rotation. And with rotation starting in July, that was cutting it really close. So what I did is I really tried to just, for one thing, I emailed with the program coordinator and tried to stay in very close contact with her, just like, I'm very, very interested, very, very interested. And I had a couple other contacts there, so that kind of helped me too, because I kind of knew, I had the feeling I was going to get the clerkship. So even though I wasn't going to find out till mid-June, I just sort of, I had one block that I reserved for it that I was sort of banking on. And if I didn't get that block, I was prepared to cancel other rotations in order to accommodate that rotation because I wanted it so badly. So I think I applied to maybe 2 or 3 per block. And some of the blocks where I wasn't applying, like I had the later blocks where I sort of saw them as sort of less competitive blocks because I wouldn't necessarily get my letter of rec in time. I applied to more and then was able to, they were later so I could cancel them. So it's kind of just depends on the timing. It depends on the program. It depends on the block itself. Because those July, August, September blocks tend to be more competitive. If it's an institution that has a medical center, they've got their own students that are competing for those blocks as well as visiting students. So, I think it really just depends on the program. But I think applying to 2 or 3 per block is pretty normal and pretty reasonable. And again, like Dr. Hendriksz said, they know you're going to cancel. They know you're waiting on other invitations. They know that you are trying to just fill up those spots. So it's pretty expected that as long as you're communicating in a timely and polite manner that you're going to probably cancel if you don't hear back in time.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then, some of my later blocks, like I ended up doing a rotation in late October to mid-November. And it was one of the last student blocks that they had for auditions. And it was actually kind of nice because it was my last one. I was really, really good at emergency medicine as far as 4th year medical students go by then. So, I actually got to really shine on that rotation. So I don't think it's a bad idea to save one that you're really interested in for a later block when you've had a lot of practice in the specialty if you end up doing multiple. So, and maybe don't expect to shine on your first one is kind of my advice there.
Nice. Thank you.
And I can comment, I think I applied, just looking back at my Vsas records, I applied to like 4 or 5 per rotation block. And these were programs that I all really wanted to participate in and do rotations in. But once I got an acceptance, I made sure to cancel or withdraw all of my other applications to not make the weird, awkward situation where I have 2 acceptances and have to make a decision, because I felt like personally that was a tough decision, and I think, I don't know, subjectively I feel like it affects your ability later on to get interviews and things like that, but that's just how I think, even though they say you don't, but I think they do remember that, oh, we did accept you, but you did not come to rotate with us. So I don't know, that's how I think. Yeah.
I like it. And I think it's important to make sure that you are being authentic to you and doing what feels right and what feels best to you too, for sure. Mohammed, do you want to tell people your Vsas 4th year story, where you're headed, how it went, what tips you have?
Sure. So I'm another 4th year. I am applying for PEDS, and hopefully I match, I guess.
You'll match.
In terms of like the sub-Is that I auditioned for, as I wrote in the chat, I used one of my blocks in the end of 3rd year as like a pre-audition at UCSF Fresno, and because I was so close to being done with 3rd year, they took me, and on interview day they commented on it. They're like, oh, you did PEDS cardio and PEDS pulm here, blah, 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 so you know a little bit about our program. So even though it was in 3rd year, they recognized it, which was really nice, because then I could like comment on things I liked and things that I had questions about that were from like the student perspective as a 3rd year. In terms of what I applied for in 4th year, I probably did per institution like 3 or 4 rotations, and then maybe 2 institutions per block, just because I picked programs that I liked. Mostly in California. I tried for some like East Coast rotations because I'm couples matching, but that didn't pan out, but that didn't matter because I still got my East Coast and Midwest interviews. And one thing that I'll comment on, at least being in PEDS, and kind of to Mandy's point where I said, where she said that you'll sound better as you go through the rotations. For my sub-Is, I did PEDS infectious disease, PEDS GI, PEDS genetics, and then my last one was actually wards, which was in December. And that kind of made me look a lot smarter than some other students might have been in December, because I knew more about GI, more about ID, and more about genetics than some of my other cohort might have. And it was commented on like during the rotation, or during like my month at USC. for peds wards, they're like, wow, you know a lot about this stuff. And it just kind of gives you a leg up. So in that regard, if you're doing something like family med or doing something like IM or peds, like don't shy away from doing any of those like subspecialty rotations, because it can help you on your later rotations. Or in my case, when I did peds GI, for that whole month, I was pretty much with the PD, and she got to see me one-on-one and really liked me, and then invited me for an interview and all that. And it just really benefited me to have that subspecialty experience. So maybe trying to do like a subspecialty, maybe an ICU if it's applicable to you, and then wards at some point, just to differentiate it, because you don't want to do like, I wouldn't want to do like 4 wards in a row, because I feel like that would be really, really tiring. So if you have the opportunity for a subspecialty, break it up a little bit, if that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the other person I saw was Sarah. Sarah, are you with us? I know she was having some connectivity issues. So Sarah, if you can hear me, just start talking whenever you're connected and able to. But otherwise, are there any other 4th years that I missed? Like I said, this list is longer than I thought. But I think we got all of them that were here. So why don't we now open it back up to questions? And now, for the most part, I'll try to be quiet and let the our 4th year experts who are closest to it answer, unless it's a CED procedural question or something like that. So what other questions do you guys have?
One question I have is, would you recommend trying to get a sub-I at a place that's you're unlikely to get an interview if you think you're kind of not a competitive candidate, but you think that they could write you a really strong letter of rec? Is that more valuable, or should you try to do a sub-I at a place that you think you'll actually get an interview and have a higher chance of getting accepted?
I'm not going to be able to be quiet. I think sub-Is are, that's the whole purpose of doing a sub-I, is so that you can stand out apart from your paper application. If I did not have my sub-I at CHLA, I would never have matched there. I had no business matching at that institution with my board scores, just with my paper application alone. My sub-I was what got my foot in the door and like really allowed them to see who I was outside of my paper application. You will get interviews at programs that you don't do sub-Is or audition rotations at. So if it's a program that you feel pretty comfortable, like, yeah, I could match here, don't do a sub-I there, right? Use sub-Is for your own personal, like, do I really like this program or not? But really use your sub-Is for the programs that you are the most interested in, so that you can really make sure that you're securing that.
Okay.
I will also say that I think a lot of the programs, just from talking to program directors, clerkship coordinators, I think a lot of them choose their sub-Is by, like, you know, as sort of preliminarily looking at people they would want to interview. But that being said, I wouldn't let, like, if it's a program you think is out of your realm of possibility for whatever reason, I still wouldn't let that not let you apply there. I would definitely apply and just kind of throw your hat in the ring. And again, if you get a sub-I there, chances are they're going to interview you. For the most part, most places interview their sub-Is and consider them as, you know, for the match. And it really does, like Dr. Hendriksz said, it really does help you to stand out and show what an awesome student you are. So definitely, you know, if you want to try for competitive programs, definitely apply for sub-Is there and use those as your opportunity to show them why they do need to rank you.
Okay.
That was my experience at, similar to Dr. Hendricks's, when I was at CHLA. Initially, they didn't give me an interview, but I went for my genetics rotation anyway. And then one of my attendings was like, hey, do you have an interview here? And I was like, no, actually, they rejected me. Ha, 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 ha. And then she goes, well, that's kind of dumb. So then she contacted the PD. And then I think Dr. Hendriksz may have talked to them as well, or maybe they contacted her one way or the other. And then eventually I got an interview there. And it was only because I showed them I'm a reasonably hard worker that I got the interview there. Otherwise, I would have just been another number that didn't have a shot at the interview, if that makes sense. So to answer your question, do sub-Is where you want to go and what you want to see. Like for me, the 2 that I did at Valley Children's, it was because it was a new program and I wanted to see if it would be a good program for me. And I thought it was. And so that like helped me rule it in. And then CHLA was my, like, let me get my foot in the door just to like give myself a kind of presence to this institution, if that makes sense.
And additionally, if you have like geographic preferences outside of California, I think you should try to focus on your area that you do want to end up in. At least I had an experience. I didn't know if I wanted to relocate to the East Coast or anything like that, but I did a couple auditions there, and there's definitely a bit of geographic bias where if you're born in California, you went to school in California, but you're considering other places around the country. I got a lot of questions as to like, oh, you're from California, what are you doing all the way out here in Massachusetts or in New York or whatever? And if you do a rotation there at a program and show that you're interested in that geographic area by doing an audition there, then they don't have to necessarily question when they look at your paper application, oh, what is this person from California? Why do they want to come here? So that's a big thing to take into consideration as well. And if it is a tougher program that you're really interested in, then by all means, you should probably focus on that as a place that you want to go.
That's an excellent point. I love it. Why would anybody leave California? I heard from Sarah, she's able to chat. She's having she's having continued technical difficulties, but she's able to chat. She's applying to IM. So if anybody wants to ask IM specific questions, she is happy to help answer those too. And maybe in the meantime, I'll ask her to type out, I don't know, as briefly as she can, her like best tips and advice for Vsas or her experience. What other questions do you guys have?
I have a question to follow up on something that Mandy said. You said that, programs are going to be looking to give sub-Is to applicants that they probably will want to interview or might want to interview. So should we be appropriately discouraged by programs that charge more for DO rotations than MD rotations? Like, should that be a sign that they're not likely to be interested in us?
I mean, possibly. I didn't actually experience any of that at the programs that I applied to, fortunately. I mean, it sounds crappy, but I mean, I think for me, it was really like, I looked at programs when I was trying to select where to go. I was looking at programs that I was really interested in, and then I would go to their website and look at their alumni and their current residents. And if they had any DOs, then it was fair game, in my opinion. If they didn't have a single DO, then it discouraged me from necessarily prioritizing that place. So yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's fair to say if they charge more for DOs and you go to their website and they don't have any DOs in their residency and they've never had a DO alumnus, they're probably not that interested in DO students. Or if you do rotate there, they might be really jerky to DO students. So that might discourage me. I don't know the answer specifically though, but it would probably discourage me.
If you guys are experiencing that, at least within California, but really anywhere where you're experiencing that, I'd like to know about it. It is at a minimum unfair to discriminate against DOs by charging more. At a more serious level, I think that it borders on being unlawful. So we've had huge issues with that before in California, and OPSC, our local California osteopathic branch, has really helped to kind of fight a lot of that discrimination. So if you have examples of that, send it to me so that we can help.
I think the most egregious is University of Colorado charges $4,000 for DOs and nothing for MDs.
Yeah, that is ridiculous and absurd.
I've heard really bad things about their culture for DOs there as well. I mean, just anecdotally, I've heard that's not a good place for DOs, sadly.
I see some questions in chat about your experience doing sub-Is during the interview months. It looks like Mohammed answered a bit. Looks like Sarah answered a bit too. But yeah, if you guys want to offer how that was for you.
Yeah, so I had interviews pretty much from October till January, and I was pretty much on interviews or on rotations throughout the whole time. So I was just upfront with them. I tried to schedule my interviews on like a Friday, so I could leave like Thursday night or get there a little bit just before the interview time. And places were pretty understanding because I would only take maybe a day or two off in between. And then, so to answer your question, like places understand. But if it's a place that you really, really want to be at, don't try and miss too many days, only because then it looks like you're not that committed, I guess. But I never had a place that like got mad at me or was like really frustrated with me taking just a couple days off here and there, because they get it. At some point, all of them were trying to apply and they understand that this stuff is important. So at least my experience, I didn't have anyone who, I don't think I had any repercussions from taking like a couple days off in between. Or during my rotations. And I'm not sure if that was other people's experience.
I had a pretty good experience. I only had one interview during a sub-I, and but that was addressed at the beginning during orientation. They knew it was interview season. The clerkship coordinator during the orientation said, you know, if you have interviews and you need time off, we understand. Let us know. We're happy to work with you. You just need to make up the shifts. So overall, I think they understand. They know the time of year. They understand that you're trying to balance everything and that you've got sub-Is and you've got interviews. So I think if you just give plenty of notice, good communication, and, oh, sorry, it just got really loud in here. I think if you have lots of communication and give plenty of notice, then they're going to be understanding. And I'm going to mute myself now.
Thank you. Jeff?
Sure. I tried to minimize any rotations I had during sub-Is, so I did 4 sub-Is back to back to back, and then I started interviews immediately afterwards and chose lighter rotations that weren't as high stress, more electives and more like primary care where they could allow me to take days off, and they were all accepting of that. So definitely tried to minimize the interruptions I had on my sub-Is, and that was my personal opinion and decision.
Awesome. Thank you. I see a new question in chat. Any advice on things that may have been overlooked when preparing for or doing audition rotations? Thinking about it.
I think for EM, the only thing would be what Amanda mentioned earlier, and then I guess what Mohammed, if you schedule kind of like your more intense sub-Is or places that you're more interested in later, that could be a good way to get like a skill set, at least because your first, like my first emergency medicine rotation, I didn't really know what I was doing and just trying to get the sense of the flow of things. But then by the 4th, you're pretty much like as expert as you can be, and you can kind of have an upward trajectory. And so that's a very important thing to take into account, where you don't want your most desired place to be your number one, because then you may not give the best impression as you're still learning. So that's an important one.
I like what's going on in chat, so I'm going to read it out loud in case any of you are not looking at the chat. But Vincent was asking specifically going to different hospitals. Most of us have only been at one hospital for the entire 3rd year. And Sarah answered, you'll be surprised how easily you learn the flow of different hospitals once you start your sub-Is. And I think that's very true. I think your 3rd year, even if you're at one specific location, you still get pretty good at kind of restarting at the bottom of a learning curve with every single new rotation experience, right? Figuring out like, what does this preceptor want and how do they want me to present and what's the best flow for this. So on your audition rotations, it's even more of that, right? Being very open to your humility and realizing that you don't know anything that first day when you're there, because everything is new to you, including where's the bathroom, can I bring my lunch, where do I park my car, am I going to get any breaks, all of those things. I know for me, for 2 of my audition rotations, I was put on call the very first night, which was crazy, and I was not prepared the first time it happened. Then after that, that's kind of what I was just ready for, right? If I end up spending the night in the hospital tonight, that's what's going to happen. So I think just being very open to realizing that you don't know much about that hospital setting, but showing them that you are willing to learn, you're willing to work hard, and all of that. And yeah, I think that does get a little easier the more you practice it.
Sarah just made a really good comment in chat about saying, you know, the best thing you can do is just show up and be enthusiastic and work hard. And I think that really is kind of what it comes down to, is they want to know that you're going to be someone who is going to be able to be excited to learn, to show up to work every day, to show up on time, to be ready to take anything that comes at you. So, I mean, kind of a rule of thumb, I'd say, is just say yes to everything. You know, like if they say, do you want to do an extra shift doing ultrasound, or do you want to come sit in on our rounds, or do you want to come, do you want to come, you know, be a part of our journal club or whatever it is? I think just say yes to everything is kind of a good rule of thumb.
I'll say something similar. With every new preceptor, I always kind of follow the see one, do one, and if there's a teach one opportunity, I'd do it. But otherwise, with every new preceptor, I'd always say, like, I want to see what you want from the physical exams or from the consults, because I was doing so many subspecialty stuff. So I watched them do it once, and then I did it on my own, and then I would always get feedback. And then that's how I handled being at different institutions, working with different preceptors, because that had been pretty much my entire 3rd year, because I was the UCSF Fresno rotation. For 5 or 6 months I was there, and then every other month I was at a new location. So I always asked my preceptor, I want to watch you, and then I want to do it on my own with you watching me, and then I want to do it on my own. And they got comfortable with that. And I think what they saw in that was that I was trying to learn before I goofed up, I guess. That I was humble, and even one attending wrote that he knows his limitations and that kind of thing, that I was willing to say, I don't know what I'm doing at this point. I want to watch and learn from you, and then I'll do it on my own, if that helps answer that question.
Awesome. What other questions do you guys have?
This one's not like a, I guess, Vsas like specific question, but I get sort of it. So basically, when picking programs that are considered out of reach, or we would consider out of reach, is that just based on like what we see on like Frida or Doximity and things like that, like where your score fits in and things like, I don't really know. I know the whole, like, they don't really have DOs in their program. I get that. But if they do, is it just board scores? Like, what else am I looking for? Or how do I, like, determine what's, like out of reach? Or, like, there's always an average for the scores, too. So where do you fall if you're in that average, above the average, like, somewhere? Like, it's kind of hard to understand.
Totally. Do you guys want to talk about how you interpret that? How you interpret kind of the difficulty level of getting into a certain program?
I'll comment a little bit, unless Jeff has something more important to say. Jeff, no. So what I'll say is, like, if there's a program you like and you're like close enough to their board score average, like, I'll just be frank and say that I got a 229 and 228 on step 1 and step 2, which is maybe average, maybe a little below average. But basically, when I saw that I was close enough to a program, or that I liked the program enough, I would apply. And if you have the money for that, great. Go ahead and apply to programs that you might think are out of your reach, board score-wise. In terms of the DO thing, I got good interviews at programs that maybe had 1 DO or no DOs at all. Like, I got University of Michigan, which hasn't had a DO, UCSD, which hasn't had a DO, but they interviewed me before I even bothered, like, reaching out to them. So I think programs, at least maybe in California and maybe some of these other institutions, are becoming more open to the idea. But I'll say, like, for me, location was really important, partly because I'm couples matching and partly because I don't want to live places that I don't want to be at for a long time. So, like, if there was a place that I didn't want to go to and it was still, like, within my reach, I wouldn't apply. I wouldn't waste my money in that regard. But if there's a place you like, it's it's worth it to just go ahead and apply, even if you think like maybe I'm not at that level of the program, or maybe they won't like me that much. Because the worst thing that they'll say is no, and maybe you'll lose some money. And we're already losing a lot of money anyway, which isn't that reassuring, but I hope that helps a little bit, because programs want to see that you're interested in them. So go ahead and apply. And then one thing that maybe is jumping the gun, but during the time when they start sending out like interviews, go ahead and send them those like, hey, I'm interested in your program. These are reasons why. That really helped me with a few places that were like, oh yeah, okay, here's an interview. And
Like
they would get back to me within a day or so.
Already?
Huh?
Like if you haven't gotten an invite,
Yeah.
how do you know when like that starts to happen?
Places start doing that. I forget when the submissions start, but then there's always like a thing in Reddit where people are like, oh, I just got my first, like my interview at this program. And there's like those spreadsheets that are going around. So that's how I found out. But other places like probably within like a month or so is when you could start sending those letters and actually get reasonable responses, I think.
Within a month
Of the, like when your dean's letter gets sent out.
Oh, I was like within the next month. I was like, what the
No, sorry. No, I'm not trying to scare you.
So the applications for ERAS for residency programs opens up September 15th.
Right. Okay. So
the dean's letter gets sent October 1st.
Okay.
So yeah, starting the month of November, those programs you haven't applied or haven't heard from yet, but you've applied to, it's totally a good idea to reach out to those program directors and say, just like Mandy was saying she did with the clerkship director, I'm really interested in your program for this specific reason. I applied, I haven't heard anything yet. If you've added a letter of recommendation to your application, that's a great time to let them know, you know, I updated my application with this. You know, is there anything else I can provide to you? I'd be really interested in interviewing with you, or something like that. It is, the responses to those type of emails, I'm always surprised with. We have a lot of students who end up getting interviews just from sending those emails.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your first question, the part before I
Yeah,
landed on?
absolutely. I mean, I think for me, it's like, I know my board scores, and then I see the range on all the programs on Frida, but then like, even if my score either falls on the higher end or wherever on that range, like if it's like a really like an esteemed program, I just kind of tell myself like, don't bother, because it's like a good program, like a program that may not really care for DOs. So I don't really know. It's kind of hard to.
No, it is. So I think the worst in that situation, the worst thing that happens is they say no.
Yeah,
You know?
so just apply.
Yeah, I think if finances aren't that big of an issue, and it can be definitely for some people, feel free to apply to a program that you think is out of your reach, because if they give you the interview, great, then that's something that you might have pushed yourself away from otherwise. And maybe others will have comments on that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we even have had students who have applied for sub-Is, but also just applied for programs that have board score cutoffs, and that those students' board scores were below those cutoffs, and they ended up matching into those programs. So I would say don't, like, although we talk about this program's really out of reach, don't put anything out of your reach. You can reach it all, right? You have to try, otherwise you won't ever know.
Okay, thank you.
And it's probably even more important for like sub-Is, where if you're really interested in that program, you should try to get an opportunity to showcase your skills. If you think that on paper you may be glossed over, because you'll have that month to be able to get to know people, get the face, and I genuinely feel at any rotation, the students who do rotations generally have a leg up on interview day, where you're really familiar with the faculty, familiar with the residents, and it's a very interesting dynamic if you interview at a place that you rotated, because then whenever they say, do you have any questions for us, you're like, oh, I already know everything about this program, and then it becomes almost like an informal conversation where you're where you're meeting with the program director, and you're not having that typical interaction of a normal someone applying to a program. You're actually like, you've spent a month there, you've spent many shifts, you've even probably worked with that person, so it's a very unique environment.
Thank you.
Great, that's awesome. So we have about 5 minutes left. Sorry, I'm busy catching up with what's written in chat. Which I agree. with Sarah's most recent response, is if you are applying to a program where you need to do a preliminary year first, and then you would match into the specialty, where should you do your sub-Is? And yeah, it would definitely be within that, the specialty or the categorical specialty. Not worry about the prelim. You should be able to get into those without needing to do sub-Is. What other last questions do you guys have? Was this helpful for you? I see Justin kind of nodding his head, kind of. Okay, awesome. Perfect. So I will, once this recording is complete, I will make it available to your class. If you guys have other questions, if you want to do any more of these sessions, please let me know. Let's do a huge thank you for the fourth years that were here. Your guys' experience and advice is totally invaluable. So I'm so grateful for you guys for being here. And I saw, I think I saw Mohammed and Sarah both put their contact information. Yeah, Mandy and Jeff, I'm sure they would be open to having people email them specifically too about EM. That's not Mandy's email. She's missing an A at the end of the Amand. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Then I think we'll probably wrap it up here. Yeah, I'm grateful. Let me know what else we can provide for you to make this a little bit easier. I'm going to end the meeting for all. Thanks, you guys.